If you have a little bit of a worry and you try hyperventilating for a few minutes, your worry will increase. It'll get stickier. If you can slow down your breathing, you will, by that in itself, help your thoughts to become smooth, and you can let go of them much more easily. So you have a direct control over how sticky your thoughts are. It actually is, what are you doing with your breath?
Before we get started, if you enjoy these episodes, you might want to check out more at optimwork.com. Our website offers unique content, tools, and exercises to help you thrive at work and beyond. We have an in-depth masterclass covering our entire theory of growth, daily recommendations for personalized advice, and a platform to help groups and organizations learn and practice optimal work together. You can get a free trial at optimwork.com. Now let's start the episode. Hey, this is Sharif here with another episode of the Optimal Work podcast, joined by Dr. Kevin Majeres. Kevin, great to be here with you again.
Sharif, it's great to be back.
Yeah, Kevin, well, I just got some great feedback on last week's podcast episode saying it was a home run, so congratulations.
Oh, wow. That's great to hear.
And then, since we're on this topic now of attention and the regulator, I thought we could get into some of the nuts and bolts of it. Of like physically, how do you shape your attention? And one of the big keys is the breath. I've come to understand that over the years. We did our first episode on breath like 2 years ago or something, when I think on James Nestor's book, which is either Breath or Breathe. I forget which one. I don't even know how to spell either one. But okay, maybe we could just turn back to that topic. Kevin, what have we learned in those 2 years? Has our perspective on breathing changed at all in that time?
Yeah. Well, to quote Will Happer out of context, we have to talk about carbon dioxide, the good news.
Okay.
When I see people, in fact, just today, I was seeing people. It's so common that when people are panicking, or just having high anxiety, one of the symptoms is dizziness or lightheadedness. Okay, what causes that dizziness and lightheadedness? Fascinating. It can only really be one thing, provided the person is not like spinning in circles in their room. The one thing that causes it is a decreased oxygenation of the brain tissue. Okay, so you can feel how oxygenated your brain is. Do you have clarity and focus? Or do you feel that your brain is foggy? I think one of the most common things in people coming to optimal work is brain fog. They want help with that. And people will discover that golden hours help their brain fog to go away. But why does that work? Well, there's something we're doing when people are starting a golden hour that is helping to better oxygenate their brain. And the paradox is it's breathing less. Okay, so to get more oxygen to your brain, you have to breathe less, not more. This is the great oxygen paradox. And it has to do with the fact that the ability of your hemoglobin to drop off the oxygen in the tissues that need it is determined by how much carbon dioxide is in the blood. Okay, so if people are over breathing, what happens is they're blowing off too much CO2. So their carbon dioxide level is going down and the oxygen gets more stuck to the hemoglobin. So low CO2 means your hemoglobin is stickier. So you can't unload the oxygen to brain tissue. So the faster you breathe, the more lightheaded and dizzy you get. Isn't that fascinating?
Yeah.
And so many people who struggle with panic, the thing that they need to do is to slow down their breathing and make it more minimal, not deep. I feel like being told to do deep breathing for panic has kept me in business for 25 years. So because if people start panicking and they try to breathe deeply, inevitably they're hyperventilating. So in fact, the hardest thing to do when you're panicking is to slow down your breathing and make it more minimal, because you're going to feel starved for oxygen. That's a good sign. You want to do it enough that it doesn't make your heart rate race, but that you start to feel a little bit warmer after a couple of minutes. And you will know the panic subsides and brain fog subsides. So this is, to me, totally fascinating. And I feel like I use this personally all the time. So because it's how I have found when you're doing meditation, the best way of staying awake is to increase the oxygen to the brain. And you do that by breathing less when you're meditating.
So is there any value to a full exhale? I've heard that it kind of just clears out the system. Like there might be old, stale oxygen at the bottom of your lungs or something, and you want to just get everything out so that you can fully refresh it with nice, clean, pure oxygen from outside. That's all junk, you're saying?
Get rid of that moldy oxygen there in your lungs.
Yeah.
Of course. No, that's absurd. Yeah. So
are you serious?
You probably should never. And I think, I remember you reminding me of this at one point, that you don't exhale more than 25% of your lung volume. And when you inhale, you don't try to get above 75% full. So on the exhale, don't be less than 25% empty. And when you inhale, don't be less than 75% full. And one of the interesting things is when you're practicing slow breathing, which we can talk about how you actually do it, one of the key things is you have to move less air, like a lesser quantity of air progressively, until you feel a little starved for oxygen, but not enough. You're not actually starved for oxygen, by the way. But you feel a little starved for oxygen.
Just because you're not used to it yet.
You're not used to it yet. Yeah. And so there's, so we can actually you can measure this. And just with my patients this morning, I was measuring this. As a rule, okay, so it's called the BOLT. And I get this from Patrick McKeon. So, and a lot of what I'm saying, I would recommend anyone with anxiety read The Breathing Cure. And because it goes through how to do this. But it's by Patrick McKeon, who is someone who suffered from asthma and all these disordered breathing. And anyway, he found the solution. It's called the Buteyko method. I may have mentioned that in the past, but the Buteyko method is developed by this Russian physiologist who helped people with asthma. And so McKeon teaches people a more modern form of how do you practice this. And it's totally fascinating. We can go into how to do it. And one of the things that's most striking, though, is people feel like they're needing more oxygen because their carbon dioxide is too low because they've been overbreathing. You will feel like you need oxygen less if you just learn to breathe less.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but initially when this happens, your CO2 levels are going to be, your carbon dioxide levels are a little bit higher than you're used to if you're breathing more slowly.
If you start breathing less, yep.
Yeah.
So then your carbon dioxide levels will raise.
And that starts to feel like you're suffocating, like it feels a little uncomfortable.
Exactly.
So you want to kind of push up against that.
You want to lean slightly into the feeling, and you do it for little bits and practices. So the easiest way to practice this is when you're in a meeting or in a class, just try to put a little bit of a pause between your breaths. The variable pause. So you inhale. In general, when I'm talking about inhaling, I'm talking about a process that lasts 4 seconds. And then there's like maybe a second in between, and there's an exhale, which lasts 4 seconds. And then there's a variable pause. That pause should last somewhere ideally 3 to 5 seconds. This is meant to be a stretch. And so if you can only do 3, great. But if by doing that, you gradually, you'll start to feel a little bit starved for oxygen. And here's the key, not enough to make your heart rate go up. We don't want you getting anxious from it. We don't want your heart rate going up. That would mean you've maybe overshot it a bit. Now, whether or not that has therapeutic benefits, it may, but that's not the point here. We're trying to do this gently. And so what I was going to say before is there's this idea that Patrick McKeon has of the BOLT score, which is your body oxygen level test. And so BOLT, I think he coined it. But it is using this Buteyko technique, which is you have someone inhale normally into their nose and then exhale through their nose. And at the end of the exhale, they plug their nose and keep their mouth closed and time. How long do they go before they feel a definite urge to inhale? And Ordinarily, that means they had some involuntary movement of one of the respiratory muscles. Could be the shoulders or the neck, or could be the diaphragm, but they'll just feel that there's this involuntary movement. People who have anxiety disorders, I think most commonly have a Bolt score under 10 seconds. So one person I saw this morning was 5 seconds and one was 7 seconds. So they felt the definite urge. Okay, what that means is their bodies are exquisitely sensitive to rising carbon dioxide, and they defend against it with hyperventilation. So these people, as a rule, are hyperventilating at rest, and they don't know it. You can breathe 2 to 3 times the total amount is needed without being able to detect it yourself. So when people are in threat mode, and whenever they feel like there's a little bit of adrenaline in their system, they're a little bit anxious, it changes their set point for how much they should breathe, and it makes it really too high. And then they overbreathe. But then that overbreathing locks them in threat mode. It keeps them more susceptible because your whole body associates, when you're overbreathing, that is associated with sympathetic activation in your body and with cortisol release. So hyperventilation creates a bit of a vicious cycle. But fortunately, it's one that you have direct voluntary control over. And so the goal, you want people to have a Bolt score of, get this, 40 seconds. So they can go 40 seconds without, after a normal exhale, normal inhale, normal exhale, plug the nose and wait. They can go 40 seconds before they need another inhale. There's no definite urge. Really fit people tend to be around 20 seconds. But the goal is to get people to 40. And people notice an improvement, that lightheadedness goes away, dizziness goes away, like all the symptoms of panic can improve when you improve your Bolt score.
Okay, Kevin, let me just give you a quick clarifying question. So one question that occurs to me, okay, if you're talking about not speeding up your breathing, if you feel like you need more oxygen, what if you're doing intense exercise? I mean, I think it's just natural. Everyone, even it seems like elite runners, breathe more heavily when they're, doing intense exercise. So are you saying we don't need to do that anymore? Before we continue, a brief message. If you're benefiting from these discussions, please take a moment to hit like and subscribe. Doing so helps us to reach more people. So you're not just learning, you're also helping others to discover a path of growth and flourishing. Thanks for your support.
There's a measurement called the VO2 max, right? That actually is linked to having a more, basically the less you breathe while running, the higher the calculated VO2 max you're going to have. Because you're improving the ability of your heart to deliver oxygen to tissue. So in fact, you want to be running in a more of a hypoventilated state, meaning higher CO2 levels. So when people are sprinting, it's better that they not really breathe much at all. You can slow down your breathing, especially when you're on a sprint. And then after the sprint, if you're doing high intensity interval training, then you can try to, and one good way to do this is to try to breathe only through the nose the entire time you're working out. In fact, the whole of your life, you should only breathe through the nose. The nose is the organ of respiration. It's tied directly to the lungs. The mouth is the organ of speaking and eating. Interesting little thing too, that with hyperventilation, speaking is necessarily a hyperventilatory state. And the reason is that you are breathing in order to produce sound. You're not breathing for the metabolic needs of your body. So in fact, you're going to be overbreathing when you speak. And so it's important for people who speak a lot to learn to allow there to be more times of silence, to decrease their total speech, and then to try, when other people are speaking, to deliberately slow down. The benefit is, as you're deliberately slowing down your breath, your ability to attend to the present moment is enhanced immediately. The very act of slowing down your breathing enhances your attention for the present moment and quiets the background of your thoughts. And this is what we've been talking about in the last 2 podcasts. But it's because deliberately slowing your breathing is the best way of activating the regulator, your frontal parietal network. We had mentioned how deliberately slow breathing and then planning the steps of what you're about to do, these are great ways of warming up your regulator. And when the more it's warmed up, the more it can restore this anti-correlation so that now you have total task attention turned on and default attention turned down. Well, slow breathing you can do without multitasking. So Sharif, as you're listening to me now, it's totally possible that you can keep your breathing slow and even and hear every single thing I'm saying, because slow breathing doesn't use words. So it's not multitasking because you're not doing 2 things at once.
I've been trying very hard to do that this whole conversation.
Have you really? So what's it been like?
It's been illuminating.
That's great.
Yeah.
I typically, when I'm listening to people, I've gotten in the habit of, I always just slow down the breathing. It's like you drop anchor in silence, and you can do it anytime you're listening to someone speak, and it does not distract you at all.
Mm-hmm. It helps you pay attention. Well, okay, so
Exactly.
to follow up on this, so if you're, say, giving a talk or presentation, I guess what you're saying is you don't want to talk too fast. And if you're having a conversation with someone or hearing someone give a talk and they're talking too fast, can you assume that, well, they're maybe not thinking as clearly as they might? You know, if they're speaking very quickly, then they're not going to think as clearly. Is that right? And we can apply that to ourselves?
I don't know if I would generalize.
Okay.
I guess if they never listen, they're not going to think as clearly. So that's probably right. How could they really be tracking the conversation if they're never listening? And so you cannot, I think it's very hard to speak and listen at the same time.
Yeah.
But I think that we were designed basically to listen and be silent. And then speaking, much less. So we can handle some amount of speaking, but people with the most common breathing disordered populations I've heard are teachers and salespeople, because they have to talk so much as part. And these are the 2 professions that sometimes have the hardest time turning off the churning of their minds. Another thing that's interesting is because slow breathing directly activates your regulator, it makes your thoughts less sticky. Hyperventilating makes your thoughts stickier. So if anyone is listening, and I wouldn't do this while you're driving, but if you have a little bit of a worry and you try hyperventilating for a few minutes, your worry will increase. It'll get stickier. So, and if you can slow down your breathing, you will, by that in itself, help your thoughts to become smooth, and you can let go of them much more easily. So you have a direct control over how sticky your thoughts are. It actually is, what are you doing with your breath?
Okay, now, Kevin, let me challenge this whole theory a little bit, which is we talk a lot about challenge avoidance versus challenge engagement being the key thing for anxiety. But now it seems like what you're saying, if I may take it to an extreme, is that the breath is the key thing for anxiety. So how do you reconcile these 2 elements of engaging anxiety or overcoming anxiety?
Yeah, so one of the things that is most important and fundamental is, what is your assessment of the threat? So if it's a real threat, if the challenge you're facing is really a threat, so then that will trigger your fight or flight response, right? And so, but if it's not, you can reframe the challenge to discover within it the opportunity for growth that it's giving you. So I see reframing as being a prior skill. So, and reframing then allows you to activate your parasympathetic nervous system, and it makes this kind of mindfulness more possible. You're going to have a harder time having the inner space or inner freedom to actually slow down the breath if you're truly in threat mode. So reframing is prior. Reframing activates your ventral medial prefrontal cortex. That is a more primal network that determines, is the amygdala in total charge or is the upper cortex in total charge? Once you've settled it in favor of the upper cortex, which is what reframing does, now the question is the background processor in charge or is the front processor in charge? So, and that's what we're talking about here. Background is if you're worrying and ruminating, and if you're kind of problem solving in your mind, versus just engaging the challenge with task attention in the present moment. So I would say this actually helps to set the stage physically for engaging the present moment. By making your thoughts smoother, which it does by activating this regulator region, the frontal parietal network or FPN, it actually makes it possible then for you to be mindful in a more intense way and to engage your work and the challenges there in a more intense way. So I don't think it's either or. I think that they all work together. And so, but this is one of the reasons I've always thought that it's first reframing to get the upper cortex in charge instead of the lower. Then it's this kind of mindfulness practice to get the front attention network in charge. And then it's the right kind of growth challenge to make sure that you're going about it according to the right brain, not the left brain.
Yeah.
So if we're going to complete the whole picture, that's how I think, that's how we talk about in the master class.
Right. Well, it's interesting. We did a webinar a few weeks ago on food and the importance of food. And now we're talking about breathing and the breath. And it seems like these are maybe two topics that are, at least historically, have been considered like a part of medicine, a part of resolving these kind of, psychological problems. People might have anxiety, depression, ADHD, and so forth. But it seems like what we're starting to realize now is that these kind of fundamental biological things, breathing and eating, are really important. Is there a bigger change going on in terms of how we're, psychology and medicine towards looking at these kinds of things?
I think this is the future of psychiatry. Looking at what are the metabolic principles underlying optimal functioning. And interesting connection, just to throw it out there. Did you know that eating more processed foods makes you more likely to hyperventilate? So that there's something in when you ingest these empty calories, your body doesn't know what to do with it. So it increases the signal telling it to burn and telling you to breathe more. When you breathe more, your body is hoping to discharge the carbon dioxide. Well, in fact, that's the only way people, this is kind of paradoxic, but when people actually lose weight, the weight is lost through their lungs. You exhale your weight because that's the only way we can really get rid of carbon. So, but there's something about the signals that processed food and sugar gives to our brain that tells it needs to breathe more. So when people start slowing down their breathing, some people notice that their tastes change. And they instead actually want more nutritious food and simple water rather than processed food and like junk drinks, like soda. So it's interesting that these things all reinforce each other.
That's fascinating. Well, Kevin, that's a great kind of big picture question to address. That's basically all the questions I have for you on this topic. I'm sure we could have discussed more, but we're basically nearing our time. So I don't know if you have any final thoughts you want to end on for us.
Maybe there's just one idea, which is if people want to attain a greater level of silence and mindfulness when they practice meditation, focusing on slowing down the breath and attending to the sensation of it. The breath should go into the belly. So it kind of goes all the way down. The belly expands more than the chest. And that's because the diaphragm is pushing things down when you inhale, but not a lot. You don't want to be moving a lot of air, and then the belly, and then, the chest will slightly relax and then the belly comes in. So that's being able to breathe slowly. If you can do 4 seconds in, hold for 1, 4 seconds out, hold for 1, that is great. That actually also will activate your parasympathetic nervous system. That's a different topic. Or you can do the variable pause if you want. Basically, if you do a variable pause, where after exhaling, you just wait, and then after 3 to 5 seconds, you inhale, you'll notice that it does a better job clearing away any kind of brain fog you could be getting while meditating. So it can bring you back more to the present moment just to lengthen the pauses when you meditate. So if you're getting sleepy, lengthen the pause a little bit more, and you'll find that it is able to dispel sleepiness. So sleepiness when people meditate is a sign of overbreathing. There's another way of thinking of it. And if you want to have a greater affection in your heart when you meditate, say you're trying to meditate on some reasons for gratitude, or you're trying to practice some kind of loving kindness meditation, let's say, you will notice that the affections of the heart are increased by slow breathing. It's the same thing that puts your regulator and lets it more fully activate your task attention. So you're more completely in the here and now. When you meditate, you experience it as fewer distractions, more quiet, but also an increased capacity for affectivity in the time of meditating. So that's been the discovery I've used for a long time. And I'm glad we get to talk about it here.
Yeah. That's a wonderful connection, I think, for us to end on here, Kevin. Thanks so much.
All right, Sharif, thank you.
All right, we'll be back next week. Thanks for tuning in to today's episode. If you enjoyed our conversation and you're looking for more in-depth guidance, check out optimalwork.com, our unique platform that delivers content, tools, and exercises to help you thrive at work and beyond.